that your boss sucks. More often than not, they're going to guess that you have a micromanager. Micromanagement is probably the highest form of bad bossery. And not like bad, but no, you suck. And here's why. Because it's probably one of the most degrading kinds of leadership that a person can experience. You see, a micromanager, it's not just a bad form of management, but it's a toxic form of management. And what do we mean by that? You see, having a boss that doesn't follow up, that's kind of laissez-faire or kind of goes with the flow, that's one thing. You can kind of predict what's going to happen there. Having a boss that tries to one-up you, okay, that's another thing, right? Having a boss that's, a bit challenging or tough on your work product, that's another thing. But micromanagement is almost like a type of psychological warfare. There's nothing more stressful than having someone who's completely and always scrutinizing your work. There's nothing more agonizing than taking a work product to a leader who's going to review it, and not just review it, but criticize it in ways that make you feel like you're not intelligent. Especially in the knowledge economy, micromanagement is one of the biggest forms of waste in organizations, because most organizations hire fully capable, fully educated, fully experienced people that there's no reason for micromanagement. And so we see the stress of it, the anxiety of it, the toil of it that it takes on our workforce. So I was reading some articles, and one of the things it said is that, 76% of employees, 76% of the workforce has experienced some form of micromanagement. Just let that sit. It's like 2/3 of people on the planet have experienced micromanagement. Somebody looking over their shoulder, checking out their work, degrading them, denigrating them, what have you, right? I guess maybe it might be helpful for us to define micromanagement, so we'll do that in a second. But 85% of the people who've experienced it also say that they have had their morale impacted. So not just like the company morale, but personally, it makes me feel demoralized. Personally, it makes me feel like I'm an imposter. 69% people say that if they've had a micromanager, they have thought about changing jobs, while nearly 40% of people who have had a micromanager change jobs. And I can tell you from all of the companies that I've worked for, I have not seen a micromanager fired. I can honestly say that in all of the companies that I've worked for, in all of the industries, I've never seen a company fire someone or reprimand someone for micromanaging. It's the most psychologically toilsome on the organization, but it's also the most acceptable. And so we have to ask ourselves why, and what makes it acceptable? And part of it is just the American work ethic of getting things done at all cost, because micromanagers do get things done. But I think it's important for us to understand what makes a micromanager, right? And I would say there's two things that could happen. One reason a person micromanages is because they don't trust you, right? They don't trust you. That's just plain and simple. Either you potentially have done something, or they just don't trust anybody, which also happens, right? The second thing is, I would say the biggest source of micromanagement is just general insecurity. People not secure with themselves, people not secure with being able to say, hey, I don't know, but let me go find out. Or I don't know, but let me ask this person on my team, because they're afraid of looking weak. And so this general insecurity is actually quite dangerous. It's the most dangerous thing to be in my perspective, right? To be in with a micromanager. So this guy named Harry Chambers wrote a book, and the book is called My Way or the Highway, the Micromanagerial Survival Guide. But one of the things that he says, he gives you 6 specific behaviors of a micromanager, and I love them. The first one is dictatorship. They dictate or manipulate things and other people's time. So you can see people dictating, like, you have to do it this way, or I want to see it this way, even though the way you put it was very acceptable. It kind of reminds me of that Julia Roberts movie when she was in an abusive relationship where all the cans had to be in a certain order. Like, she put things away, but the cans had to be in a certain order or he would slap her around. Not okay, but he would. They control the process or how work gets done, right? And they dismiss other people's knowledge. So that's the second way that micromanagers behave. They use their power or authority to control others. I was working for in another business I had. I was working with churches and nonprofits, and I was telling one of the senior pastors, I said, one of the things that I've heard in feedback from this very large church is that a lot of people use your name to get things done. And that leader said to me, I thought it was so powerful. He said, it's a poor leader that has to use my authority to get things done. Right? I think we're moving in this kind of genre and era of leadership to be more influential, but to lead with an iron fist or an iron thumb or putting your thumb on people's neck is just not necessary in most cases. And if it's necessary, you probably don't have the right person in the right job. But to use power and authority, I say this, anything overused is toxic. If you use too much sugar in a recipe, if you use too much salt in a recipe, anything overused is toxic, and authority is no exception. And if you find yourself in an environment where authority is the way that things get done, get out, because you're not going to win. People will use their clout and push their weight around, and more often than not, they will not listen to sound judgment. One big way you can see this is in a lot of the reports from the NASA explosions that happened in the 80s and again, and whenever they happened. But more often than not, it was these people in high places where people who were working on the product saying, hey, listen, this is wrong. Hey, listen, we shouldn't do this launch. Hey, listen, I remember I was in kindergarten in Pensacola, New Jersey at A.E. Burling Magnet School. I don't even know if it still exists, but I was sitting there watching the Challenger take off because Big Bird was supposed to be on the Challenger. I think he wasn't, but there was like a kindergarten teacher or someone who was on the Challenger, and we were all watching it in the auditorium. And I was 5 or 6 years old when I watched a rocket ship explode full of people, and reading the reports about how micromanagers did not allow people who had the information to bubble it up, to share what was wrong. And they knew it. I'm telling you, micromanagement is such a dangerous thing. Go watch all the documentaries. I think CNN had one. There's plenty of books on them. Do your own homework. But I promise you, it's a very dangerous thing when people try to lead all of the time. I wouldn't say lead, push things through from an authoritative space. You can also know a micromanager because they're always asking for updates. Like, what are you doing on this? And what are you doing on that? And what are you doing on that? And I need this report. And I need this. And they're also unable to delegate. More often than not, micromanagers won't share work because they typically want the credit so that they can keep adequate distance between you and the leadership that they report to or what have you. It's a very, very, very toxic thing. And I think it devalues who you are. It's immoralizing. And I personally have a story I want to share with you. So after having my second child, having been out on maternity leave, having worked in a role, and I was well regarded in the organization, well regarded from my client groups, from my peers, and what have you, I came back just in time for our annual performance reviews, which everyone loves so much. It's a whole different story. And one day I will tell you, we're going to have a sidebar on like why people hate performance reviews and why they're done so poorly and why your organization isn't investing in them. We'll talk about that later. But so I'm back in time enough to have a performance review. Mind you, I've been out for 16 weeks or whatever it takes to have a kid, right? So I was out for a while, and I come back to my leader to have my performance review. Now, mind you, I was knocking it out the park before I had the baby. Cool, no big deal. And I was reporting to a female. So I didn't have any issues with like, oh, you've been out and had a baby, so we want to give you a little rating. That wasn't the conversation. The conversation was this: Natalie, in order to do better in this organization, you're going to have to shrink yourself. Say what now? I was told that in order to do better in this organization, that I was going to have to shrink myself. And I'm like, oh, okay, how does one shrink oneself? Like, what do I do? Do I like fit myself in a box? Do I wear smaller clothes? How do you shrink yourself? And the leader proceeded to say, well, your ideas are too big and your plans are too big. And, the organization just can't take all of this. And you don't understand. You're just too big. I'm too big. The heck do I do with that feedback? I'm too big. And I've recounted, because by now I had worked for this leader for several years. It was just the strangest thing. Thinking about all of the times that I provided, remember one of the last episodes I told you, in order to like make a mark in your organization, do your job, do it well, do it irrefutably well so no one can say anything about how well you do. Add value so people want you to work with them and build allies. I had done all that. And so I had gotten both a reputation in both countries and had, people wanting to work with me and asking for me by name. But I had to shrink myself in order to be successful. I was by then I was like maybe 2 months postpartum. And I'm proud of myself, y'all. I was able to hold it together. I did not cry in that office because by then I had gotten used to fragility of leadership, right? People who I work for, and I had a lot of experience that was great, but they didn't know how to deal with me. And I learned this, a couple things. One is I was really hurt by the feedback. Being hurt is a problem, but staying hurt is a choice. And so after I got the feedback, I also realized that feedback is only as valuable as the person it comes from. And I had to decide whether or not I valued this feedback. And I valued it in the context that she was right, that I was too big for the situation with her. You see, my shine should not have been diminished because she couldn't deal with it. But she was right. I was too big for her. She couldn't deal with it. And it was unfortunate, and it was frustrating, and it was seen by a ton of other people. Like, people used to like, oh my God, you really are graceful to be able to work in that situation, right? And I appreciate the time, and I learned a lot from this leader. So don't get me wrong, it wasn't all bad, but like there were definitely some significant times where I'm like, I don't know what the answer is. So stop telling me to do the work over again. Tell me what you want it to be, and we'll just color in the numbers. You see, it's frustrating to work for a micromanager who tells you, I call it the bring me the rock exercise. So the bring me the rock exercise is this. And you tell me, give me some likes in the chat if you've done this before, where the leader will give you, your manager's giving you an assignment. And they say, go do this assignment. And you do it with, limited direction or what have you. And they're like, yeah, I don't want that. Do it again. And do it again. And do it again. Well, that's the story of Bring Me the Rock. The sensei was telling the students, bring me the rock. And the student runs out and brings me a rock. No, I want a bigger rock. He goes and get another rock. No, I want a smaller rock. He goes and get another rock. No, I want a greener rock. He goes another rock. Oh, it's too green. Now I need it yellow. And until the student stops and just asks, like, what's the weight, size, smell, shape, origin of country do you want this rock from? Otherwise, you're just going to be in this exercise of trying to fulfill a need that's never articulated, more often than not because they don't know what they want. And a lot of the work that I had in that environment was just like that. We were given assignments, or I was given assignments, and I would do based on my knowledge and experience and education, multiple years of education. And nope, that's not what I want. Nope, that's not what I want. So you can appreciate that I found it odd. Like, I'm too big, but more often than not, the scope of what you wanted, either you didn't know until I showed you something, or you weren't sure because you didn't have my experience. And so I appreciated the feedback of, hey, shrink yourself. Not because I had ever intended to, I just understood how to play the role with this leader now. It was very disappointing and very frustrating. And I think that's the point I want you to understand is you can be hurt about a situation, but you don't stay hurt. That's thing one. The next thing you do is you realize that when people don't understand how to leverage your strengths, they will do what they can to mitigate you as a risk to themselves. You see, more often than not, people will, if you don't understand the value of a thing, if you understand the origin of the thing, the use of a thing, you're more than likely going to misuse it or at worst abuse it. When you don't understand the purpose of the thing, you're more often going to misuse it or at worst abuse it. So think about if you've got an oven, let me just tell you this. If you've got an oven in your house, if you pull out that drawer at the bottom of the oven where we store the long pans and things like that underneath of it, at least that's what I learned to do. That's really not how they meant for you to use the oven. That part's supposed to be a warmer that you put your food in so that when you turn the oven on, it can keep the food warm. Did you know that? Did you know that your McDonald's French fries, the arch on the back of it, you can either fold it back to put ketchup on or fold it forward to keep the fries warm? Did you know that? At least that was the original design. There are probably thousands of things in your life that you're probably not using to your fullest potential. Take your cell phone. Most of us only use our cell phone for 20% of its purpose, right? And unfortunately, a lot of organizations can say the same about their employee base, that they don't know enough about you, your gifts, talents, or abilities to know how to use you fully. So they use you for how they want, not what you're capable of. And then you get these conversations like, you got to shrink yourself because I don't know what you are, but I know you're not what I need you to be. And that's unfortunate. Micromanagement is a crappy situation. And it will, of all of the situations, it will suck the life out of you if you let it. I do believe you need to build allies and still do your job. But at the end of the day, I'll tell you a couple of things that I've done to mitigate my micromanagement. One is I want you to take a week and I want you to outline the behavior of your micromanager. I mean, everything. When they come into work, what their attitude is, when they ask for things, how they ask for things. And I want you to look at the pattern of behavior and figure out how to anticipate it. It sounds kind of crazy, but one of the ways that I've been able to mitigate micromanagement, and this wasn't the only micromanagement, this is the one that kind of stuck in my mind, but one way to mitigate it not fully, but well, is to anticipate their behavior and get ahead of it. Figure out what they're going to ask for, figure out what they're going to need, and give it to them ahead of time to give yourself some space. Don't be caught off guard. When Wayne Gretzky says, I don't go to where the puck is, I go to where the puck is going to be. Figure out where your puck is and where it's going to be. It will help you at least give yourself some breathing room so you can figure it out. So for example, instead of asking for status, I would just send my leader status requests, status updates of where I was with all the work. I categorized it based on project and said every week on Fridays, here's what and she never asked for it, but I made it a point to do it because I got tired of answering the questions. And eventually, I think one week I didn't give it. She's like, well, where's the status report? Oh, you read those? Yes, I do. I love those. Okay. Anticipate the behavior because it will give yourself some breathing room. Secondly, when you're given a task, ask questions. Ask questions like, what does success look like? Ask questions like, when we're done, what will this do for the organization? Ask questions like, what other resource can you provide to me to make sure I get this work done correctly? Ask questions so that you know how to be successful with this leader. The third thing is Find someone who's survived this person. Look for the survivors. Look for the Underground Railroad at your work who knows how this person behaves, and figure out the tips and tricks from the other people, from your ally group that we told you to build before. Find tips and tricks from them on how, and again, don't browbeat, don't commiserate. It's not worth it. And you don't know who knows who and who's connected to what. But for the people that you know who do a good job, like, well, tell me how you anticipate and support successfully this leader. Find that out. Thirdly, I think I'm up to 4. Document everything. I'm gonna just keep saying it to you. Document everything, because I bet you they're doing the same. So that when you're in conversation and they're trying to recount the things that they think you haven't done, you've got a running tab of what you've done because you've written it down. Don't be caught off guard. Unfortunately, this is what makes it stressful. It's because you're always having to be on the defensive. But if you can get on the offense, you can get ahead of your micromanaging leader. And if at any time you feel degraded, demeaned, or what have you, try to go to your HR team, try to go to your ethics team. And if you have to, pull the ripcord. Get out of there. It's not worth your sanity or your stress. You can get another job. When someone tells you that your ideas are too big, or you're a big fish in a little pond, or you need to shrink yourself, don't be mad. Maybe they're right. And that's okay. Find yourself another pond to swim in. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. I really want you to join our community, join our Facebook group. Go ahead and check our website, yourbosssucks.com. Tell us your stories. We want to hear from you. We want to help you. Hopefully you'll be able to be spotlighted on one of our next shows. And remember, don't let your bad boss suck the life out of you. Take care.